It's about time that we get a new Nissan Armada. The old one, when you looked at the interior, just felt like you stepped into the mid-90s or something, specifically with the wood grain trim and the big radiuses and curvatures, specifically on the passenger side. It did not look like a 2025 model year, but now we do thankfully have a brand new Nissan Armada for 2025. So we're going to have a look at this, compare it to the old one, because I do like this design. You can clearly see that it is an Armada, specifically on the side view, and more so with the D-pillar treatment. It looks like a modernized version of the car that we're so used to seeing, and I do like that. The front end brings a lot of frontier into it. It looks pretty cool. So before we jump in and compare the front side, rear, the interior to the old one, let's have a look at this article from Car and Driver, and let's check out some of the spec and the tech of the 2025 Nissan Armada. So it ditches the V8 but promises more capacity. So you now have a turbo V6, add a Pro 4X trim with air suspension and a locking rear differential. You have a twin turbo 3.5 liter V6 now with 425 horsepower and 516 pound-feet of torque. Not bad power numbers at all for a V6, so I don't think you're going to miss the V8. Probably better fuel economy here as well, I'm not entirely sure. The new model should start at around $60,000 for a base Armada. Cars these days, I mean, the prices are just getting nuts for a Nissan SUV, but it is the big brother here. So the new Armada is slightly longer than the model it replaces, and Nissan says that this of course gives it more cargo space. It still offers either 7 or 8 passenger capacity, and you have the same, even with the V6 now, you still have the same 8,500 pound max towing as before. You have a 9-speed automatic transmission. Rear-wheel drive is standard, with 4-wheel drive being optional. I don't see why anybody would not get this with all-wheel drive. It just would not, or 4-wheel drive would not make sense to me. I would probably go for the Pro 4X trim, which I do believe this is right here, with some more rugged wheels and tire setup and different bumpers and so on. It just looks proper to me, and also these red accents that we have on the graphics. So the new Pro 4X trim joins the lineup for 2025, which gives you a different front and rear bumper, give a better approach and departure angles, and it also has skid plates, so you can probably take this on some decent trails here. Yokohama Geolandar all-terrain tires and a red accented tow hooks. Of course, we need to have red accented tow hooks if it's going to be an off-road trim. On the inside, look at this. It looks so much more modern than the 2024 Armada. Even though, yes, we do have dual screens here, trend of what most companies are doing these days. But I have to say, it looks decently integrated. It doesn't look too bad here. We're going to talk more about that in Photoshop in a minute. So, dual 12.3-inch screens are standard, acting as a digital gauge cluster and the infotainment screen. However, if you go in the higher trim levels, you're going to get a bigger 14.3-inch center screen, which I feel, personally, dual 12.3 is probably way more than enough screen sizes for me. I would not need a 14.3 infotainment screen, but maybe that comes standard with the Pro 4X, so I kind of have to get it if I was to get a new Armada. You also have a wireless Apple CarPlay and an Android Auto functionality. As I said, pricing expected to start at 60 grand with the higher trims, the Platinum Reserve, which is also a new trim, and the Pro 4X approaching $80,000. So it's a small little cabin here. You can buy a cabin or you can buy a Armada. It's totally up to you. So let's jump into Photoshop here. Have a look at this new design from Nissan. And I want to show you this because this is where it feels like it is a clear modernization of the old Armada, and I really like this design. It has a very chiseled design. I feel like it got a lot more Americanized now. It looks almost a little bit GMC-ish with the C-shape front headlights. The old one still had full LED headlights here. It got a refresh. I don't remember exactly the year, but it definitely needed a refresh in the front end to bring it up to date, and they did a pretty decent job with this. You have the V mode motion grille here, typical for Nissan, and a very static design, as you can see, because this being the big brother, as I've said before, the bigger the vehicle, the less styling you want to have, the less curvature you want to have, it be a little bit more stately. But I always thought that the fog lights here, they sit, all alone down here. They don't have any sort of integration, and they also sit in a weird angle, so they're angled a little downwards. Never really felt that they were decently integrated in the front end. But looking at the new one here and compare the two designs, very stately. It has this confidence to it, this new Armada, with this starting line here. So everything, the front end just starts underneath this line here, which I love. We have a new Nissan logo here as well. Actually, you had it on the 2024 as well right there. But look at these headlights. Static looking headlights, which is totally fine for a big brother. We have the same thickness going all around the LEDs here, which normally I wouldn't be a fan of. I would like to see some more dynamic thicknesses to it. Maybe make this a little thicker like this. But in this case, since it is the big brother, I kind of feel like it doesn't matter. It still suits this car to have just simple lines as LEDs. Daytime run lights. You have full LED headlights here as well. The V-shaped grille is, I'm not sure if it's gone or not, but you don't have the same framing, chrome framing, which I'm glad that they removed, because I think this looks more luxurious without this big chrome grille that we have on the previous generation. This looks more classy to me, and thankfully they worked on this little detail here. This lonely little fog light down there now has a clear look. Look the beautiful house they created for the fog lights down here, sitting right here inside some chrome pieces down here, and inside this beautiful framing for the lower section of the graphics. We have a clear separation as well from the top half of the graphics and the lower half of the graphics, adding some more of this stateliness that I want to see in big SUVs like this. This is supposed to compete, for example, with the Toyota Sequoia, and if I were to pick between those two, that would be a pretty hard choice. I really like the Sequoia. Made a full review on that, and I almost fell in love with it when I was reviewing it. But looking at the side view here, I think this is probably the coolest view for the new Armada, because you can see here that they took the old design, but they just chiseled everything up and made everything more confident and more angular. It was a little smooth in the previous generation, a straight line here, horizontal lines like this, and then we have a horizontal box for the greenhouse up top. Very simplistic design, but this area was the key graphic in the side view for the old Armada, with this thick D-pillar here and this bumper looking like a massive underbite in the rear end. A little bit too pronounced in my opinion. Always when I saw an Armada, it looked very strange with a massive bumper in the rear end, and this graphics here is just, I don't know, 80s or 90s graphic for this specific detail right there. Chrome mirrors as well, chrome door handles. So looking at the new one here, all the chrome, or most of the chrome, is gone, as you can see. Thankfully, I do think this integration looks a lot better than what we had here with this organic tumor that we have on the side there. This looks a lot more cleaner, a lot more static as well, just straight lines like this, looking a lot better with the black side mirrors as well. And we still have a clear shoulder line here, which has a very interesting design to it, because check this out. We have a shoulder line going up here in this level, and then it comes back in a lower level for the rear end, and this top shoulder line then comes back here as well. You have a separation, so they call this the floating roof, with the black roof up here being separated in the D-pillar with this graphic here. So we still have this wing, thick D-pillar that we have in the previous generation, but it's just been modernized in a very, very nice way, in my opinion, for the new 2025 model year. The wheels look very similar to the old previous generation. I do think these wheels actually suit this truck or SUV, because they feel classy. They have this elegant look to them, and I do think they look nice. And have a look at this. They finally removed this underbite in the rear end, because this looks so much more sleek than the previous generation Armada, which I don't know how they designed. This rear bumper is just a shelf on the back there, but this looks so much cleaner. And if I zoom in here on the rear end, again, some Chevy Tahoe GMC comes back to me, and that's what I said, that it feels a little bit more Americanized than the previous generation right there. Now, looking at the rear end before we have a look at the interior, which I think was the most important piece to redesign and update, was the interior of the old Armada. But now, this actually looks pretty good. You can barely see that there is a massive shelf here from this angle, and the taillights look very modern still today. We have a nice chrome, I think this is chrome right here, or silver connection piece right there, new Nissan logo Armada right here, and we don't have visible exhaust here. The exhaust sits down here, which I think looks good on this type of package, this type of luxury vehicle. But now, look at this. What do we have? We have the trend of the decade coming to Nissan as well. Nissan, Mercedes, Audi, everybody is doing a full light bar in the rear end, and that happened here for the Armada as well. I don't think it looks bad. I just think it's getting a little too generic. Let's just put a light bar in there because everybody else is doing it. So I guess Nissan decided to do that as well. But you can see all the beautiful chamfers going around the key graphics here. I love this little chamfer here. We have another chamfer going down here for the trunk right in this area. And this lower section also it looks beautiful. I don't necessarily miss the exhaust pipes here. I don't think I want to have exhaust pipes. Maybe square ones would look better in this case. It just feels like this is a SUV, specifically if you have Platinum, the top, executive trim level, the luxury one. You don't necessarily want to shout about your engine and so on. It needs to be subtle, and I think Nissan did a good job with that here. And this is also some chrome trim going on the lower section of the greenhouse right here. And I don't know about you, but this taillight definitely feels inspired, a lot of inspiration from Chevy Tahoe and the GMC Yukon and so on, to just try to be in the same sort of style as those SUVs, which is not a bad thing. It doesn't look bad at all. I do like that we have some dynamic features here. For example, this being a little thicker right here than this piece and these pieces right here. It's interesting that they decided to add some dynamic movement to the taillights in the rear, but for the front end, they just stuck with, the same thickness of the LEDs all around. But overall, looks like a pretty decent update, and I'm glad they stuck with the original design language, as I said, because you can clearly see that this is an Armada when you look at it. It's just a modernized version of it. Now, look at the old interior here. This just screams almost, late 90s, early 2000s to me, with this integration of the passenger side here, and this material, it just feels so outdated. This was in a desperate need of an update. You also have analog clusters here with some buttons on the sides. I don't mind the buttons at all, as you know. I'm a fan of all the buttons here, but the general style of this interior just feels way dated for a 2024 model year. So I'm glad that they totally refreshed it. And now we have a much more modern looking interior here. Look at this runway in the middle here going up to the climate control settings. And it looks like we have some physical knobs and buttons for the climate control setting, which is perfect. You have the fan speed here. You have the dual zone climate temp buttons here. You have heated and cooled seats buttons here. I can see that. We have nicely integrated vents here. Then we have, I do believe that this is probably the top spec with the 14.3 inch, the bigger infotainment screen, which looks decent. I mean, it's not a bad looking integration for the gauge cluster and the infotainment screen, because they have a nice flow to them. And we also have this area here floating down into the passenger area, looking very clean and simplistic in some ways. Steering wheel as well. I mean, look at the difference between the design of the steering wheels here. 1995 and this finally 2025. So great job by Nissan overall to refresh the Armada, and it's a cool refresh of the previous design. It's clearly an Armada, no matter what angle you look at it from. Maybe the rear end looks a little bit too Chevy or GMC, but you have the light bar in the middle, which sets it apart, I guess, from those other SUVs. Great job by Nissan, and this is going to be probably a very important SUV for Nissan, specifically here in the United States.